bring both man and beast to the bow. Ben whinnies, irritably beneath me, shaking his great mane to and fro. Easy, boy, I tell him, gently stroking the side of his head. It will be over soon enough. By my side, Mr. Samuel Parkers sits atop a charger of his own. Even through the driving sheets of rain, I can still make out the tears falling down his cheeks. It pains me to disturb his secret thoughts, but we have a job to do. Shall we? I urge. He utters a long sigh and raises his head. If we must, Colonel. We dismount and begin to make our way to the waterfront. Please, make way. King to business, please, make... Mr. Parker orders, but his words fall on deaf ears. It is not that these Kanaka do not listen, but they are simply too grief-stricken to hear. Every eye is focused on a single point, the massive silhouette of the USS Charleston lying at anchor, swathed in black bunting. She proudly flies the Hawaiian flag alongside the Stars and Stripes, and both are at half-mast. Unstifled sobs rend the air as the royal barge comes to rest alongside the pier. The crack of cannon fire echoes across the harbor as people mourn, shouts, "The king is dead! Long live the king!" I feel my own tears begin to spring forth. How can this be? His Majesty was so full of life, and he was so quick to offer up a song or a tale. To imagine him wasting away so far from the love of his people or his queen was almost too much to bear. "We must begin, Curtis," Mr. Parker urges. We straddle our mounts again and fall in line behind the long black hearse as it makes its winding way towards the Iolani Palace. A final look back reveals a wall of faces, each one grim and tear-stained as my own. And why shouldn't we weep? Our king of 17 years is dead. 17 years. Had it been that long since I first stood upon a similar pier amongst a similar company, awaiting news of Kalakaua's election? It wasn't raining that day, but rather sunny. The sunlight was gleaming and shimmering off the waters of Waianui boat landing. And there were no tears that day, only gaiety and laughter. The crowd was a sea of life, the women clad in colorful holoku, and the men adorned with fragrant lei of pikake, plumeria. I was 19 at the time, barely more than a keiki, and for the first time in my life, I had not a care in the world. King Kamehameha V had died, and with him died my obligations to the Kamehameha family. I had served him long, and his brother Alexander Liholiho before him as kapu. And while I'm deeply grateful for these honors, it felt good to be free at long last. And so it was, my spirits were light on that February day, that I found myself joking and sporting with a gaggle of local kids. Now, one in particular, a large lad who, with a stalk of sugarcane dangling from his pudgy maul, suddenly spoke up. "Hey, look, here comes that wiseacre." Sure enough, an old man was making his way up the pier, leaning heavily on a crooked cane. And the old fellow was a familiar sight on the streets of Hilo, particularly on steamer days, and he had a fondness for gossip and a smugness about him that was just unpleasant. "Shall we take the old fool's coin?" The fat boy snickered, the sugar congealing thick and white at the corners of his mouth. Now his cronies eagerly nodded their approval. "Let him be," I urged. "What? You afraid he's going to put a curse on you? Piehu?" The fat boy snickered, employing a nickname given to me during my court days. According to my auntie, my very first sight of Alexander Liholiho's beard sent me scurrying beneath her skirts Now the king found this so amusing that he dubbed me Piehu, meaning shy, light-skinned. And unfortunately for me, the nickname has stuck. Don't call me that. I puffed out my chest and squared off against the fat boy. Besides, he's just an old man. What do we have to be afraid of? Old man, eh? The old wiseacre snuck up upon us as if he had a trick up his sleeve. You would do well to respect your kupuna. Have you all come to hear of the vote, Keiki? We have, the fat boy answered, haughtily. Ah, then you all must be Queenites. Of course! The Queen Emma speaks for the people. The fat boy took an especially large bite of the sugarcane stalk and then spat it at the old man's feet. Not that it is any concern of yours, old man. Now, who do you support? I posed in a futile attempt to make amends for my compatriot's behavior. Oh, I would have that Kaleleʻona would be crowned queen as well. But mark what I say. Kalakaua will be king. And his will be a troublesome reign. What do you mean by that? I wonder. His very name, Kalakaua, spells it. The old-timer was right. It is the very Hawaiian custom for us to give keiki meaningful names in Hawaii. Now, in English, Kalakaua translates quite literally as the day of war. Now, I found this revelation so troubling that I paid little attention to the wager that the fat boy made with the old wiseacre. I paid little attention to the steamer arriving and the announcement that Kalakaua had won the election. And I paid little attention to the other young boys reluctantly giving up their winnings to the wise old age. I mean, the day of war, surely this wasn't ill for the kingdom. I had not even learned of Kalakaua until after he visited Hilo in the months thereafter. As the royal barge put up alongside the pier, the animated crowd started chanting, "Keali'i and my Keali'i! The king! Here comes the king!" Now I pushed my way to the front of the crowd, and from my new position watched as our kingly visitor stepped ashore, followed by his retinue. David Kalakaua was a handsome man, of better than medium height, and carried himself with a great dignity. His black wavy hair extended down his face in sideburns that framed his dark complexion. Now, before he boarded the royal carriage, he turned back to look at his assembled subjects, and in that peculiar way that Hawaiians impart a wish by a movement of the head, he looked me in the eyes and then nodded. Before it then left. What did this gesture mean? I mulled this over for the 2 days thereafter. When a member of the king's retinue appeared at my door and then escorted me to the palace dining room an hour later, where the king was at breakfast, I approached with no little trepidation, Your Majesty. He welcomed me with a wide smile. Piehu! The nickname made me wince. Your Majesty, why haven't you come to visit me as I intimated to you upon my arrival? Thankfully, my misinterpretation of royal body language yielded no unfortunate consequences. Instead, we had a fine talk. You were brought up as a kahu, the king declared, and given the advantages of your education, it is your place to be in my court in Honolulu. He stood up from his chair, drew himself up to his full height, and the voice brimming with kingly authority declared, "I command you to return to Iolani Palace at the first opportunity. See to it that you obey." And obey I did. From that moment on, I stood by the merry monarch's side through thick and thin. When the time came, For him to send a trusted servant overseas, I was named Minister Plenipotentiary and Royal Envoy to Foreign Lands. Now I was almost panic-stricken at the prospect. How could shy little Piehu discharge such royal assignments? He expected me to attend the coronation of Tsar Alexander III, introduce myself to the new king of Serbia, and discuss matters of immigration with the governments of Great Britain and Japan, amongst other things. Now my fears were unfounded, for everywhere I went, I was treated with the utmost respect and civility. And I ate decadent meals in Paris, enjoyed glittering displays of ballet in Moscow, always prepared to answer the many questions posed about our tiny kingdom in the Pacific. Upon my return, the king was so pleased with my performance that he heaped additional titles upon me. The Adjutant General to the forces of the kingdom, Chamberlain of the royal household, Governor of Oahu. I had done little to deserve these honors, and yet I will never forget the king's kindness and generosity. But the old wiseacre was right. The days of war were many under Kalakaua's reign. Now his critics crowed that he was easily influenced by foreign powers, as evidenced by his signing of the Reciprocity Treaty, proclamation of the new constitution, and the appointment of one foolish and self-serving minister after another. David Kalakaua was many things to many people. No longer. The king is dead. Long live the king! As the funeral procession made its way through the palace gates, a heart-wrenching cry filled the air. Ben whinnied his protest. Easy, Lord. The shout erupted from the throat of the Queen Dowager of Iolani. She stood alone on a lanai, weeping and leaning over the railing as her husband's casket was borne up the broad palace steps. It was almost too much to bear. The king's coffin was placed on a bier in the throne room and covered over with a long cloak of yellow feathers, a symbol of his great ancestors, and surrounded by towering kahili. With those duties fulfilled, it was time for the king's kin to pay their respects. The Queen Dowager Kapiolani could barely speak as she took my arm, and I led her to the entrance to the throne room. The adjoining anteroom was filled with members of the royal family, Princess Likelike, Governor Dominus, and Princess Li, Queen Liliuokalani. I had nearly forgotten. I studied her for a long moment. She sat up straight and proud, her lips pressed tightly together, and not a flicker of emotion waved over her regal face. How fares the Queen? I ask in a low voice. Mr. Parker grimly replies, not well. When news of the king's death fell on the ears of the Queen's cabinet, they fell upon her like vultures. Hers will be a troubled reign. Yeah. Perhaps the sun is not yet set on the day of war, I insisted. She needs to surround herself with advisors that she can trust. Therein lies the rub, Colonel, Mr. Parker adds. Who can the Queen trust? The Queen Dowager emerges from the throne room. Mr. Parker gives me a solemn nod. It is his turn to fulfill his duties. He slowly approaches Liliuokalani and offers his arm. And for a long moment she looks up at it before she rises, takes a hold of it, and then with a stately grace proceeds towards the throne room. It was the last I would see of the Queen until later that evening. We find ourselves once again in the throne room, tasked with the duty that I dread the most. It is my sacred responsibility to transfer my late sovereign's body from his current coffin into the koa wood box in which he will be buried. Now, none are permitted to attend this most sacred ceremony, save for a few of the king's most trusted retainers. The Queen watches us as we prepare for this grim rite, her face a mask of strength. I'm about to begin when I notice a pair of men members of the Privy Council, I believe, lurking in the shadows. Please, gentlemen, forgive me. I address them in the courtesy born of a lifetime at court. But you are not allowed to attend this most sacred ceremony. Not allowed! One of them screams. We are members of the Queen's most trusted cabinet. Please forgive me. The tradition mandates that you vacate the room at once. This is an outrage, the second one exclaims. We are members of the Queen's future cabinet. Suddenly the Queen interjects, speaking in a voice with such royal authority as would fill her brother with pride. This is no time for politics, gentlemen. You will do as the Colonel says. The men grit their teeth. With a glaring look back at me, bow, and scrape out of the room. Forgive me, Your Majesty, I implore her. I'm not ready. Somehow the nickname doesn't quite sound as incredible to me. She continues in a low voice, her eyes fixed on that same point where the men once stood. Everything is happening so fast. I barely had time to register Taffy's death. She references the king by the childhood nickname she gave him. The Privy Council insisted that I take the oath of office, and then the demands came. Everybody wants something of it. But ruling the kingdom is no easy task, I offered. No, but it is my task. What would you do if you were king? Your Majesty, I nearly laughed. If you were king, how would you begin? I suppose I would dispense with the circle of sharks, and in their place, choose an advisor I could trust. Oh, really? A man of experience, she suggests. Oh, of course, Your Majesty. And wisdom? Yes. And who possesses unquestioning loyalty to the throne? Yes, Your Majesty. She nods thoughtfully. Well, luckily, I know just where to find such a trusted advisor. Here. Will you serve me as you have served my brother? For a long moment, I am silent. I slowly run my hand along the koa wood coffin that will be my king's final resting place. Rest easy, my friend. The days of war are at an end. The troubles of others are just beginning. I turn to face the Iaukea. The king is dead, I